describe what might have woken me. I step out of my bed, abandoning its relative safety, and push open the slightly ajar door, allowing light to stream in. My persistent dread of being alone in the darkness makes sleeping almost impossible for me, and my parents are inevitably stirred from their slumber by my screams, at least once during the night. Navigating past the slightly open door of my parents' bedroom, left so they can hear me in the night, I approach the entrance to the adjacent room. Before it transformed into my father's workspace, it served as the house's catch-all storage space. This is where our miscellaneous items resided, forming untidy heaps, waiting either to be discarded or repurposed. I stand in the doorway, my gaze fixed on the darkness that terrifies me, gradually transfixed by the sight of the swirling inky blackness at the room's far end. This swirling pool of shadows appears to be growing, as if another gateway is unfolding into a void so impenetrably dark that sound is stifled within it. A form begins to emerge from the swirling void, initially just as dark but distinguishable from the black abyss that churns like a lightless galaxy at the back of the dim room in an unremarkable Midwestern home on an ordinary suburban street. Gradually, a figure ascends from the portal. In my 3-year-old perception, it takes the form of a colossal monster, a zombie pirate of sorts. It seems lifeless, or perhaps it truly is, yet it fixes its gaze upon me with one functioning eye and a sinister consciousness that terrifies me to the point where I am rendered breathless. I am unable to cry out for help, incapable of alerting my parents or emitting any sound whatsoever. The entity before me stoops due to the low ceiling, its bulk not fitting comfortably. It begins to lean towards me, its expression leering as if driven by a ravenous hunger. But what is it hungering for? I make it to the front door despite the sensation of trudging through the mire that plagues those who endeavor to flee their dream-induced monsters. I throw open the door which, at the age of 3, I'm certain I wouldn't have been able to reach, let alone unlock. Suddenly I'm on the sidewalk, making my way 2 doors down to my grandparents' house. Yet, as expected, I find myself repeatedly falling. My feet refuse to cooperate, feeling heavy, as if the very air is pushing me back towards the gnashing teeth that I can hear just behind me. In a moment of folly, I turn to look back. The monstrous figure is upon me. During my time at the 4th house on our cul-de-sac, I'm certain I had numerous dreams. Yet only one remains etched in my memory. The terror it ignited within my small frame, permeating every neuron, pore, and muscle fiber. Unlike almost every other dream before or after, this particular one persisted in my consciousness due to the profound fear it instilled. The darkness within this dream possessed multiple layers. The room itself was dim, but the core of the dream was steeped in a darkness so profound that malevolence emanated from it like a manifestation of hell itself. It's conceivable that the creature in my dream was a demon. That, at least, is my belief. The dream was merely its starting point, not its culmination. As I matured, my fear of the dark evolved into an aversion to dark doorways. I couldn't pass by them, look into them, or coexist with them in any manner if they revealed only darkness. Initially, I didn't understand why, nor did I question it. Similar to my fear of the dark at age 3, my fear of dark doorways became a rational fear ingrained within me. As I grew older, my parents quickly grasped that leaving lights on in every time flowed, and my comprehension of my fears deepened. To some extent, I began comprehending why I was afraid. By the age of 8, I realized that standing in the doorway of a dark room and peering into it, especially one particular room, resulted in the darkness itself becoming aware of me. It was a sentient force with consciousness and a purpose. This took place in 1982, as I know from the release of The Empire Strikes Back 2 years prior. My third-grade male classmates endeavored to outshine each other with their Yoda imitations, showcasing their mastery of Wookiee roars and emulating Han Solo's swagger. They even mimicked Yoda's cryptic statements, quoting his famous words, "When you look at the dark side, careful you must be, for the dark side looks back." While I sometimes laughed at their antics, this particular quote sent shivers down my spine. It ceased to be amusing, it felt profoundly true. Well before entering junior high, my awareness of being scrutinized by the darkness transcended mere consciousness, becoming more substantial. On occasion, I erred by standing before the dark entrance of my father's study. These occurrences usually transpired when I was drowsy and unintentionally stumbled into the wrong place after using the bathroom in the middle of the night. In those moments, it was as if the darkness could infiltrate my awareness and draw me toward the door. My semi-conscious mind would hum, and something would slip through it, whispering to me, inviting me to look, reassuring me that nothing dreadful would occur. It was a lie. It was always terrible. My half-awake pre-adolescent mind was pliable during these episodes, and I could sense cool tendrils of darkness curling around my wrists and ankles as the murmurs persisted, luring me into a sleepy cocoon of apparent safety. However, the respite was short-lived. Those cool tendrils around my limbs would abruptly tighten agonizingly as the darkness attempted to tug me toward its voracious maw. I would wake completely in those moments, screaming for help. My parents would rush into the hallway, switching on the light, scanning with a blurry 3 a.m. panic to determine that once again I stood alone in the corridor, shrieking without apparent reason. "What's wrong?" my mother would exclaim, her eyes wild, her nerves frayed to breaking point. She would look at her 12-year-old daughter, who had developed a penchant for sleepwalking and night terrors, just when she had hoped I would have outgrown the nightly nightmares that had plagued me since infancy. Exhausted, she would grasp my shoulders, propelling me back towards my room as I could only raise my arm and point towards my father's dim study in response. Shouldn't she have outgrown all of this by now? My father would grumble in a blend of frustration and concern, a sentiment carried into my room by the timbre of his voice. I could hear him, despite his whispered shouting. The strain and annoyance were evident in his tone, making it penetrate into my room. I attempted to explain it to them during the daytime, but their responses consisted of eye rolls, exasperated sighs, and the ceaseless repetition of the same refrain. "It's just a dream." Upon leaving that house at the age of 17, I swore to never return. For a while I almost succeeded. I knew that the only means of escaping the darkness that menaced me nightly was to depart from that house for good. I required a scholarship from a reputable university, the farther away the better. I applied to over 50 colleges spread across both coasts with a few scattered throughout New England. I fantasized about pursuing higher education in California, but the notion of attending a university beneath the vivid red and yellow rain of autumn leaves felt quintessentially collegiate. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA throughout high school, skipped a grade, and graduated as valedictorian. I received full scholarships from 6 different institutions. On the day of my departure, my mother wept, although I knew she was proud of my achievements. My father kissed me, expressing how much he would miss me, but I discerned the relief in his gaze at the prospect of his first complete night's rest in 17 years. I didn't blame him. I hoped for the same. However, I couldn't bring myself to. I managed to avoid visiting for Thanksgiving, concocting a fake part-time job as an excuse. Christmas proved more challenging. I attempted to use the non-existent job as a reason again, later inventing an urgent project I needed to complete. Finally, I claimed illness at the last minute. I sensed my mother's skepticism, and I couldn't blame her. I didn't invest much effort into my pretense. Perhaps her increasing melancholy allowed the darkness to claim her. My father mentioned that she had begun hearing murmurs during the night. I recognized those whispers. I knew their intentions. I simply hadn't anticipated their execution. They had never succeeded with me. Or so I thought. A few weeks after moving into my college dormitory, I noticed how much more vitality I possessed. Everything appeared brighter, and I felt more alive. Reflecting on my time at home, it was as though I had been living underwater. What I could hear had been muted, my vision had been blurred, and I frequently felt as if I were starved for air. The darkness hadn't overtly attempted to end my life, but it had been draining me for 17 years. Yet for my mother, it required only a single nocturnal journey. Yielding to the temptation after countless nights of hearing the whispers in her mind, she followed their voices down the corridor while my father slept. I know what transpired next, despite there being no witnesses. My father merely saw the aftermath once the darkness had quenched its thirst. I know this because he too succumbed, falling lifeless before hitting the floor. The stroke mercifully claimed him before the darkness could enjoy a second serving. I should have anticipated this retaliation for leaving, for ignoring its nightly beckoning. Now that I've returned, I sense the familiar numbness creeping over me as I move towards its door, retreating from the flames swiftly devouring the living room carpet. I also sense its awareness of my presence, its ravenous eagerness masking any realization that its abode is on the brink of conflagration.